Hey guys, this is Anthony here, and we are on our third video for the prerequisites of the Network Automation Config Compliance course for those who wanted a beginner Python project. And so far we've covered, of course, parsing the API response, and then the second piece, we actually made a request to the API to pull it down instead of having a local file. So now in this particular video, what I want to do is firstly I want to show you Pycharm because we are building something out now that's uh, a little bit well sized. It's probably optimal to build out a instance in Pycharm. So you're probably wondering what Pycharm is. Pycharm is an IDE. An IDE is an integrated development environment. And the difference between a text editor and an IDE is an IDE has several benefits, one being that you can run the code within the IDE, and there's a lot of built-in helpers, I guess you could call them, to where they will point things out. So for example, if you have a function that you wrote but you're not using it, then it can say, hey, you're not using this. Or maybe you imported something, a library that you imported, and it's not being used, and they'll point that out. And another nice thing is you can navigate the code very easily when the number of files begins to grow a lot. And then another nice thing, which is how I've laid this out, you can set up a virtual environment for each of your projects. So firstly, I want to cover briefly what a virtual environment is. A virtual environment is essentially a Python instance in a sandboxed environment within your operating system. So you can think of it that way. It's just a instance of Python that's isolated from the main Python instance, and you're probably wondering what is the benefit of that. Well, the main thing is if you want to test a Python application with certain versions of Python, then that's what's really nice about virtual environments is you can say, hey, I want to test, for example, maybe you have Python 3 as your main Python, but then you're like, I don't want to clutter up my machine with Python 2 code and kind of go around and find all that and remove it and uninstall it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in a virtual environment. The nice thing about virtual environments is once you're done with them, you just deactivate it and then you delete the folder where the virtual environment resides, and then it's all good. So for this case, you see here already that I have a virtual environment set up. The way that Pycharm instantiates this is they have a generic folder structure that they go by that has bin included in lib, bin being binary, lib being library. And this is just kind of a very generic Python installation layout. So the bin activate is where if you were in the command line, you would call the bin activate, and that's how you would get into the actual virtual environment. And then you have all of the typical other things that you'd find in a Python install, like the easy install and the pip. And then down in the lib, this is where all your libraries will be installed. And as you can see, these are the ones that are currently installed by default. Pretty cool stuff. And then within the virtual environment, you have a nice little layout set up. So you're probably wondering, how do I do this? How do I get Pycharm? And how do I install it? And how do I get into this particular mode? Well, just go to the website. This is Pycharm, and download it. I'm not going to really go through this. You just download the file, you install it, and it'll be there. The biggest thing that I will say regarding this is the setting it up is that there's a lot of stuff that comes into Pycharm regarding the settings, regarding what you can do with it. And I'm only going to cover a couple of very basic things because these are things that I know people tend to enjoy playing around with. But one of them is going to be the appearance of your Pycharm environment. So there's a theme here, and there's only 3 themes, unfortunately. With the older version, I had more options, but here, for some reason, it won't let me use anything besides these 3. But you'll see right now I'm using something called Darkula. This is the default light. I don't like light, personally, just because of, you know, what I prefer. And then this is high contrast. I've never used high contrast. It just looks weird. It's too much for me. So I prefer Darkula, and there's a lot of other people who prefer Darkula as well. And it's really nice to mess around with the colors and all that stuff, but I don't try and get too far in the weeds on that. Some people get really fancy with that. I don't really care. As long as you have a appearance that's good enough for me, that's fine with me. So you're probably wondering how you set up the virtual environment within Pycharm, and it's extremely simple. Because all you have to do is open up your new project, and this is what pops up. It gives you a directory of where you want this new project installed, and then it asks you, do you want a virtual environment or do you want the generic HIP environment? And so virtual environment is nice because it puts all your packages in this isolated environment. You're still using, as you can see here, you're still using the base interpreter. You're still using Python 3.7, but you can use other ones if you'd like. But for this case, we're using 3.7. Okay. So then after that, you create your new virtual environment, and then we're going to start making some files. So I'm going to make a requirements.txt file. Okay, as you remember from the first video, requirements.txt is something that you can use if you don't want to individually install the requirements packages for your environment, and it's really highly recommended. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't use it. So once you put your various packages in here that you want, what's really nice about Pycharm, assuming that you have this structured properly, it's going to automatically say, hey, these are not satisfied. Let's install them. Okay. And guess what? Installing packages. Right? If I go in the terminal, it's not going to show me here, but it'll show me over here. Okay? Keep that in mind. So we got to wait. We wait, and it does its thing. Processing. And as it does that, we are going to make another file called main. And main will be our primary file for all the stuff that we already learned. And all the stuff we already populated. So here's something else that's really cool about Pycharm. So at the bottom here, you saw it told me, hey, this is a shortcut to do this. That's actually a plugin. It's a really nice one. I highly recommend you install it. So finally, we are going to throw this into here. Okay. And there is the whole enchilada. There is one thing that's missing. We're missing pretty print. So let's import that. In fact, if I come down here, it'll tell me, hey, you don't have it imported, as I said before. So now we have pretty print, and now we can run this quite nicely. And there we go. We have our API call, and we have our response with the data in it. So now, the next thing is we want to put this data into a file. And we don't want to put it into a generic text file because we want it to be structured so that if we want to access the data, then we don't have to worry about parsing through it unnecessarily. So we want it to be as easy as accessing a dictionary within a file. And that's where PyYAML comes in. So for those who don't know what YAML is, you have different data structures that are commonly observed within web development and also within programming, or not programming languages, platforms like Ansible. So Ansible uses a lot of YAML formatting, and there's different data structures. You have XML, which is terrible. So there's actually some APIs out there where you can access the API and it's going to give you XML, which is very difficult to read. But most of the time, the best, most easy to read data structures that you'll observe here in your REST API, you see JSON. YAML is even easier than JSON to read. It's very, very readable. So to deal with that, we also want to import YAML, but first I want to go over the commands we're going to use for this piece. PyYAML is the library that we want, okay? And there's two main methods you can call here. You have the load, so this just basically loads a set of existing YAML, and then you have dump, and dump will just put a data structure into a file. So we want to use dump. Now there's one other thing here. You'll see it says dumper equals dumper. This is where you pass in. This is where we pass in our dictionary, our data structure, and this second place here is where we're going to pass in the file that we want to dump it to. So this is a generic tutorial on how to deal with file management. There's two ways. You may commonly see a file being opened this way. The problem with this method is you always have to remember to close it afterwards. If you forget to close it, then it's just unnecessary overhead. So instead, what you do is you use the with statement, and with the with statement, there is no need to close it. You don't have to remember any of that. So we're going to use this as our structure for now. So now what we got to do is we got to look at how we laid this out originally. What we're doing right here within the for loop, within each iteration, is we're saying I want to print the output of this specific entry. But the thing is, what we want to do is we want to create a data structure of all the devices in one set, and then we want to store that into the file. So the way we do that is before you even go into the for loop, we want to have a list. And we'll call this list my devices. It's just an empty list. And for each individual entry, instead of printing it out, we're going to say my devices dot append. We're going to append all of our devices into this list, okay? And then after we're done adding every single entry, what we're going to do is we're going to say with open our file name, which will be mydevices.yaml. We're going to put in W representing write, W is write, R is read. And we're going to assign this object to a variable. So I'll call it YAML file. Okay? And I'm going to say YAML.dump my devices, and we're going to dump that to the file YAML file. Okay? And one thing we need to do here before we proceed is we don't have YAML imported, so let's import YAML. Okay? And the other thing is we don't need pretty print anymore at this point in time. So now we have everything. What should occur is, and actually, let me just know that you're sure on this. You don't need this file to exist. Python will create the file automatically. Okay. So that was actually trying to save me from deleting the file. It was saying, hey, we see in this code, we see that this file is going to exist, so I don't think you should delete it, but it doesn't really matter for this particular situation. If the file was intended to exist prior and you're just actually updating it here, which you could do that too, then it would have been important, but in our situation, it doesn't matter. So we're going to run it now, and it says process finished with exit code 0. Exit code 0 in Python is good. There's like probably 4 or 5 different exit codes that you actually want to pay attention to, but 0 is your good exit code. So now let's look at mydevices.yaml. And looky there. In a file, we now have this data in a nice format. A very nice format. So now that you've seen how we store the files, I want you to observe how we access this file. Okay? We're going to do the exact same thing that we did up here, except we're just going to say .load. And actually, we're going to assign this to my YAML file. Nah, I don't like that. Let's just call it new data. And then, actually, I'll re-import preprint. And because it's a list, we're going to iterate through it. And we're going to say pprint.pprint entry. And we're going to run it. Oh, read. And there you go. And it looks like there's a message here. It's not a error. It's a warning. It looks like there's a better practice to how this is written, and you can always check this out if you want to. You could go to the page, and it would show you on the page what the error is. So, what is the alternative? That's the question. What is the alternative? So it looks like you're supposed to specify this for some reason. So let's try the base loader, YAML.baseloader. Let's see if that still gives us what we want. I'm not actually sure the difference between the few, but this is a pretty basic operation, so I'd assume that it wouldn't be too complex to just throw this in here. Base loader. Okay. And then let's run that one more time and see if we get the message. And we didn't get the message. So, very nice. Very nice. There's some duplication that you'll observe here. 1, 2. Whenever you have duplicate code, by best practice, it is recommended to essentially refactor that into something reusable, like a function. The only thing in this situation is you are not you're not doing the same operation. You're doing one in one you're doing a dump, and in one you're doing a load. So what you could do, actually I know exactly how you could do this. I'm going to turn this into a function. And I'm going to say down here, or excuse me, I'm going to say up here, def YAML function. We're going to have 1, 2, 3 parameters that we pass into this. We're going to have the file, which is always mandatory. We're going to have the operation, which is always mandatory. And we are going to have the, well, I don't want to call this operation. Let's say permission. Permission read write. And we'll call the other one operation. Operation being, is it a dump or is it a load? Okay. And then within the function, we are, actually we may not even need the permission. Yeah, we don't need this because it's implicitly assumed. If operation equals dump, elif operation equals load, oh yeah, and we'll also want data. Data will be here. And then we're going to do the same here. Say with open file read as YAML file YAML load. Oh yeah, right, we gotta say and then what we will do here is we will say for entry in new data well, I guess it depends on how you want to do this. For now, let's just say return new data. And that's it. So then let's remove all of this. And we just say YAML function my devices our file name my devices.yaml and our operation is dump. Let me just call that again. Oh, actually, there's one other thing you want to deal with here. The reason I didn't put else here is if somebody does not pass in dump or load, then an exception needs to be raised. Simple as that. And then we'll call this one more time. Oops. We'll say load. So you're probably wondering why I did this. And it's really because if I want to use this again and again and again, then the benefit of writing it as a function is it makes it modular to where I can just plug it in when I need it. And I wanted to make it as generic as possible to where it's not really specific to our use case. So in this situation, the way that I wrote this pretty much works for nearly any situation you could possibly be in. So now let's see what happens when we call this, okay? It's going to give us, and I'm going to delete this file again, just so you can see the magic happen. And again, it's going to tell us this, all right? So when we call this, and here's our file, okay? Now what I'm going to do here, one more time, I'm going to comment this out, and I am going to change this to something random like that. And as you can see, exception, DUML is not a valid YAML operation. So, based on that, you now see how you can refactor your code and make it reusable. It's pretty cool, right? Very nice little thing you can do. And there's probably some other refactoring that we may do in the future, but I just wanted to show you how you can do that and take it and put it into something you can reuse. And, you know, for every situation, if you can write it that way, what's really nice is there's other programs you could easily take this and you could plug it into. You could use it in many different places. So hopefully that was informative. That was the lesson for today. I just wanted to show you those three things. I want to show you Pycharm. I wanted to show you how to store, manage files, specifically YAML files, because that's what we will be working with in the config compliance course for those who are enrolled in it. And then finally, I wanted to show you how to do a little bit of refactoring and better practice. All right? Hopefully this was informative. And for next time, I have another plan to release another video. I have not announced what it will be yet, but stay tuned and see you soon.